So you don't get a pass by saying it's hard out there, man. No shit. The DNA that makes up your corporeal being sits at the end of a chain that is a billion deaths long. And it persisted through that chain where most of the other genetic material did not. If you've got big dreams, bad genes, you're in the right place. Bromley merch is available at barbellapparel.com. Getting a lot of questions about the mess behind me, like, Bromley, clean up your room. Are you doing okay mentally? Did your wife kick you out? What's going on? The pipe that feeds my toilet tank burst, flooded my office. I am not voluntarily staying in the forest that takes us to Halloween Town because I think it's like on point for my branding. So this is my life right now. But that's besides the point. Today we are getting into muscles and women. Maybe you live in a place that looks like this and you're wondering, hey, if I get really jacked, is that going to make up for the fact that I don't have a car or a job or prospects or maybe a personality? Am I not getting laid because my body fat's 19% instead of 14%? We're going to answer those questions and more. So first things first, we're not talking about superficial shit like what women report that they find attractive. We're not talking about like waist to shoulder ratios or how deep the gutters in your abs are. We're talking about real outcomes like what tends to give men preferential treatment or improve dating outcomes. The patterns of behavior women tend to exhibit. That's kind of what we're looking at. And it's going to offend some people because I know this field of study has given rise to some really stupid fucking ideologies. It gave the red pill its time in the sun, which thank God is slowly imploding upon itself, and the men going their own way, which is like the lamest shit I've ever heard. It's like, good, go your own way. Save the future from your pathetic, sad sack, non-competitive genes. It's like if a wolf became self-aware and recognized the daily hunts as some type of like unwinnable rat race. Like nobody wants to hear from that wolf. They want him to go starve in the corner while he writes his sad poetry and slowly remove his genes from the future gene pool. So part of what we're going to get to as we talk about this is things that you can actually do that are going to give you a leg up so that you can rediscover that competitiveness and show tangible returns in your own life. Because I think there's a lot of things a lot of men can do very easily that they either don't know about or they talk themselves out of because they go all doomery and think it's worse than it is. So hopefully my situation gives you a little bit of insight. Now, the saying goes that the best coaches are those who started out very mediocre and strained, just worked hard, grinded to get good. And as far as dating goes, I think I have room to speak. I mean, I started out super insecure. You know how if you're a bad test taker in high school, as an adult, you might get sweaty palms when you see a Scantron test. That's me with like handshakes. I've fucked up so many handshakes in my life. I've always been very introverted and I moved around a lot, which was exponentially worse. So yeah, fat kid insecurity. So I started lifting weights. I know that's super weird. I'm sure you can't think of anybody you know that fits that mold. Long story short, I ended up in a really bad marriage because I did what a lot of people do. And I had to settle for the first rusted, flat tire having bicycle that was missing the chain that just happened to roll in my front yard. And it ended up in a marriage that was short but longer than it should have been. We were together, I think, less than a year, married less than a year. And it was like that scene from The Office where Dwight's talking about Jim and Pam. And he's like, I think they both could do better. We had that sense of each other. I don't think we had mutual respect for each other. We weren't together for the right reasons. We didn't have same values. It was a bad situation. And when you have to settle like a hungry raccoon at the bottom of a Whataburger dumpster, you're getting like whatever slurry exists at the bottom. It's a mix of like the grease from the patty melt with like the bits of the Dr. Pepper milkshake. That scavenger mode, it's not a good place to be in. Now, I had been lifting weight for some time, but I was in my go mad permabulk phase back then. And part of it was because I had given up. I was like, well, I got a significant other. This is as good as it's going to get. No reason not to drink a half gallon of chocolate milk after every workout. And I was hell bent on going heavies. I was like 255, probably 38% body fat. And all I knew is the more I ate, the stronger I got. And I was going to go full bore. And that probably chipped away at her affection for me a little bit in hindsight. I can see that. And what ended up happening is I went on a warpath because after we split up, I thought, I'm never getting in that position again. I'd rather be alone than settle, not for someone who's not the girl of my dreams, but for a shitty relationship. After that, I realized, I'm like, oh, the relationship is the goal. You need somebody to build the relationship with who fits certain criteria, but it's not some mythical female. It's the relationship you're looking for. And I sure as shit wasn't going to be alone. So I knew I had to get my shit together. And that started with the first thing I could do in my current circumstance was start taking care of my body. So I went on a massive run where I lost a bunch of weight, got very lean, and started to focus more on my presentation, my ability to interact with others. That led me into online dating. This is 2016. I'm hearing all this shit about how bad it is online. I remember what it was like trying to chip away on fucking Tinder and Plenty of Fish. It can't be that different than it was today because you see all the same vapid shit Men were largely the same. There was the same competition, same dynamic of dudes flooding women's inboxes and women having to like bat all the digital dicks away. So standing out online, very difficult thing to do, especially, I don't know if you've noticed over the last 600 videos, I'm not the most photogenic pig in the pen. So I had a big hurdle to get over. And because I had a good ability to write and communicate and I practiced certain strategies, I got a leg up. Bottom line is I found my in. So the question is, did that transformation, did the drop in body fat, did getting as close to having abs as I probably will ever get in my life, did that make a difference, or was it something else entirely? So let's talk about how women be. Both men and women have physical attraction. They have preferences. What changes is the degree to which that plays a role in their decision making and how many trade-offs they're willing to take to try to get that preference. For women, status is much more important. That doesn't necessarily mean you got to be a billionaire. It's not like global status or world renown. It's in your immediate sphere, around your family, the people you interact with, your friends. Do people respect you? Do they think highly of you? Do they look up to you? Are you useful? Are you a role model? So community is a big thing here. And that's going to be the big thing that men have to focus on if they are trying to find somebody as a long-term partner. Now, men will typically date down as far as status and across. This is very easy to think about. There have been a lot of millionaires who have hooked up with like hot waitresses. There have been a lot of men who are very well to do, have high status, who have no qualms about dating a woman who is less experienced, has less education, doesn't earn as much money, might be a lot younger. That's a very normal thing. On the opposite hand, women very rarely date down, at least statistically. I'm an exception. My wife has a master's degree. I do not. That is not the norm. And it creates kind of a problem in society because you have equality, which is women doing better and better, but men are also doing worse. So now it's 2-to-1 about women graduating to men, but women still typically don't want to date somebody with less education or who earn less money. I've had both of my wives tell me flat out, I can't be with somebody who earns less money than me. And there are a lot of people who believe that. And a lot of those people who believe that call themselves feminists. There's a wanting to have it both ways. Is the role that women should change their standards? Yeah, probably, but hold your breath for that one. This is kind of baked into our DNA. And even if it isn't, it's baked deeply enough into the thread of society. It's not going away while you're still breathing air. So nobody is coming to save you. That's really important. So think as if you're going to buy a car. You need a vehicle for a specific purpose. You're a dude, you need a truck for a job. You got this spectrum of things you need and things you don't want at all. You have minimum requirements, the must-haves. You have strong preferences, things you can take or leave, preferences against, and then you have shit that's a deal breaker. If that's there, I'm out completely. Now, if you're a man, you're likely to have a strong preference for something that is aesthetic, something that is like a Corvette or like a muscle car from the 60s, something that looks clean, that tells people you're here. And other things that might be important to other people, you might take or leave if you can get that, like how easy it is to get in and out of, like what the gas mileage is and so on. And if the car is just really incredible, you'll actually probably deal with a lot of silly bullshit that you'd prefer not to. In fact, if the car's pretty enough, you might even realize that deal breakers actually don't exist for you. Now, on the other hand, if you go to the only car lot in town and there are no vehicles, you'll probably settle for the rusted windowless van that doesn't shift into third gear, because having something to drive around town is better than nothing at all. This explains why every female on my 600-pound life has a dude. Now, if you're a woman, you have a strong preference for status as opposed to aesthetics. You still like aesthetics, but you'll absolutely put that on the take it or leave it, provided there is this status that you're getting that widely outpaces the next viable candidate. So the research on it shows that women like aesthetics for like a fling, for a hookup, or if you're cheating, but for long term, it doesn't play that much of a role. And of course, there's always some woman that's like, oh, it's the same for us. And of course, they never went through male puberty, and they don't really recognize that OnlyFans would cease to exist if men weren't around, because OnlyFans girls would have nobody's built-in evolutionarily wired irrational sexual impulse to exploit anymore. So whoever status is on the list, physical attraction is going to be a notch below it for most women, or their physical attraction might actually be a direct proxy for status, like height or broad shoulders. I mean, think about it, guys. How many of you have a height that you find sexy in a woman? Because guys are weirdos that fetishize everything. If you're 7 feet tall or 4'3" as a woman, you're still probably not going to have a problem. Women focus on that because height is a status symbol. It changes how people interact with you. You stand out more, you're more physically imposing, and all of that resonates. It's less about how being tall looks. It's more about how the culture, how the people in the room receive that person who is tall. And it's the same for all the things that women typically cite they like confidence and humor. Those are proxies for social competence. And then there's things they don't cite, like the vehicle you drive, the house you live in, the profession you have. Are you unavailable? All of those things increase attraction as well because, again, they are proxies for status. Now, looks, of course, make an impact, but there is a difference between the physical attraction women just feel without any other context and the physical attraction that exists as part of this like holistic view that's also based on how other people view that person as being desirable or attractive. And the wisdom is that women are just generally more concerned with the latter. So the big reason I went into all of this is the takeaway. If a man has traits, physical traits, that positively impact the way that people in general respond to him, that will have a positive effect in how attractive women see him. And that also means it's highly relative. The new project, I'm very excited to bring you BaseStrength AI. No matter what program you do, eventually progress is going to stall. That balance of stress and recovery, it's going to get a little wonky. And the only way you keep going is if you personalize it to yourself. This is all fine-tuned, exhaustive decision-making that we set based on the information you put in. So to start, there's a huge questionnaire. Everything from your lifting style, your perceived weaknesses, your tolerance to work, your training history, all of these things get factored into trying to set a good starting point for you. That is put against a backdrop of my template. So I started out thinking this is a cool gadget for people that are just highly serious and want the ultimate edge on their training, or for people that just like trying new shit, that try every new app when it comes out, or for people that just wanted to offload their decision making completely onto somebody else. All valid reasons to try this out. But as time went on, I started to see this more as something that inevitably had to be the replacement for remote coaching. This cuts that out at the knees because every time you plug in information, you're getting direct feedback. Like, nope, this is what you're doing now. This didn't go as planned. This is plan B. Oh, this went really well. You're sandbagging it. Kick it up a notch. So all of that is taken from the beginning through each workout, through each week, through each block for as long as you run the programs. And look, if you're not a guy that's sauced out of his mind or have all the elite genetics, this is the type of stuff that you want to tighten up. So if any of that sounds interesting, go to basestrength.com, try it out. There's a free trial. Again, so much gratitude. Really happy to be part of this cutting edge tech. So hit the link. Thanks again. Till next time. This is Bromley. I'll see you. And all of us spend all our time on Instagram looking at the top performers, the highest earners, and we start to hold ourselves accountable to that. And then we're like, oh my God, it's fucking hopeless. You just need to stand out within your own real life social domain. That's all you have to do. There's the sphere of people you know, the sphere of people she knows, and then there's where it overlaps. And in that middle, you just have to be seen as somebody who's competent, somebody who's looked up to, who's generally regarded as useful. And if you have assets beyond that, that works all to your benefit. Now, the reason I'm not talking about objective standards about what body type women like is because it's pretty hollow, because all that stuff breaks down once you add in all of the other contexts. The male body type has been pretty well established. It's a guy who's tall, 6 foot at least according to women, has more muscle than average, but is not overly heavily muscled, and somebody that has decently low body fat, so they have a broad shoulder to narrow waist. That's generally it. It's not groundbreaking stuff here. But the case in point is how much this changes when context comes into the fold. I had a very good friend back in the day. We worked at a grocery store together. He was over 400 pounds at the time. He's since lost a lot of weight, but in our heyday as 19, 20, 21-year-olds, he had game. And we did not live in a small area. We lived in the Inland Empire surrounded by millions of people. The thing is, he was funny. He was charismatic. He was charming. He stayed up on pop culture and fashion. He was clean. He dressed nice. He took care of himself. He leased a nice car. He took pride in the work that he did. He was seen at work as a role model. The managers played racquetball with him during lunch breaks. Even when he was in a lower tier position, people would still like seek his approval. He had this very imposing presence that was a mix of everything together. It was a general like, I'm capable, I set the bar. Other people recognize that. And when all of that shit is in line, 400 pounds, who gives a fuck? Now, it didn't hurt that he was extraordinarily strong and he had the social awareness to know how to kind of like wedge that in kind of a playful way for like demonstrations of feats, to the point where like girls were asking him to like pick them up, and it became kind of a thing where we worked. Now, the point isn't be funny or be charismatic or be strong. Of course, all that stuff does play a role. Men tend to see attractiveness in a vacuum. It's this thing that exists on our computer screen that we pay a very discreet membership fee to stare at for too many hours out of the week. It's this thing that exists by itself and we just want it to have it. Women tend to see it as part of a whole equation, as part of a package. And that context isn't enough. You have to take that then and put it in a social environment and gauge exactly how everybody else responds to that individual and all of the other context that goes into it. Only then can you really get an idea of what that attractiveness factor is going to look like. Now, to contrast this, I've known multiple guys with jawlines and sub 10% body fat. Some of them were literal bodybuilders who could not consistently get dates to save their life. And a lot of them end up going that route because it's safe and secure. You end up fixating on the gym too much to the point where it actually becomes a distraction that hurts you. Because as you're squeezing out these marginal gains, you're actually not interacting with other people. You're not establishing status in an actual social environment where you're going to be seen and you're going to be appreciated. Your social skills are getting worse as your insecurities keep growing. Now, like most things, we stupidly look at the ideal as if it's an option, as if that's actually what we're going to achieve. Guys, no woman you ever meet in real life is actually comparing you to like Conor McGregor or Tom Hardy or fucking Jeff Bezos. Those are people we all see and they're out of reach. If they're out of reach for you, they're out of reach to the people in your social circle. So instead of looking at that top rung, focus on your domain. How many people do you know? In what domains do you know them? Do you know them at work? Do you know them at school? Do you know them out and about through family? As you broaden that out, your ability to increase your status within that group is what makes exponential growth as far as the options that are available to you. So it's not looking at the top rung, it's looking at the next one above us and thinking, okay, how do we get to that one? Because that creates the biggest return. Every rung after that is further apart and gives lower return. So let's say you're 170 pounds, you have kind of a dad bod, you're not very muscular. You might think, oh, poor me, this isn't what women find attractive. But if that's your after picture from coming down 200 pounds from being morbidly obese your entire life, not only did you jack your status up by virtue of not being a walking heart attack waiting to happen, but now you have a story. Now you're somebody who can commit to these huge impossible tasks that people can't fathom. Now you've kickstarted your path. Whatever you do is going to be marked by that journey that so few people would have the courage and discipline to follow through on. And just in that change, your options for potential partners went through the roof. You're not going to be moving to Beverly Hills and just cleaning house, but you are going to have a much bigger time, especially in your immediate vicinity. The biggest returns happen with those first steps. It's a most important thing. But if you go from 18-inch arms to 20-inch arms, there is zero guys who have ever gotten laid with 20-inch arms who weren't going to have the same outcome with 18-inch arms. And this is where that meme comes from, where men have this image that we get really jacked and all the women start flocking around us. And that's the real competition. It's us as gladiators fighting it out. But instead of swords, it's with like dumbbell curls. And whoever has the biggest arms is like picks up all the girls and carries them off into their Cadillac and then drives off to have an orgy in the sunset on the peak of Makeout Cliff. That's not how any of this works. Competition's extremely important, but again, it's the context of everything else together, and there are zero women, even female bodybuilders, are not tracking the arm size, are not tracking these minor details of potential partners. So that's where you get the biggest tragedy. Like I said, it's guys spending more time in the gym, not working on the things they need to, not adding to that well-rounded package you need that involves you being part of a community and social and working on your personality and learning how to engage with other people. Instead, it has you isolate more to something that is not going to give you any return unless you already come with those things built in. And the funny thing is, you could stay out of the gym completely. And if you were working on your game in those other domains, you would still level up exponentially. So my advice to people looking for an edge in the dating market is, will hitting the gym help? Like, yes, absolutely it will, but only if it coincides with growth in other parts of our lives. And that's one of the reasons I am such a cynical prick. I talk so much shit about competitive culture. I see a lot of shit in lifting weights that's really like self-filleting bullshit that doesn't do anything to grow your character. It's the neediness to want recognition and a trophy before you've done anything. It's the need to constantly be validated. It's the things that feed into the insecurity you started with that aren't inching you closer to an end game where you could never work out again and still be okay as a person, where you could have so much abundance in your life, where you could have such a robust, well-rounded social group and skill set and be reliable and set and secure enough that you could actually support other people and be an asset to the community, because that's going to be the thing that makes sure that you don't die alone in a nursing home. So unless recreational weightlifting in some way is feeding into that progress, I would absolutely call it a distraction, because the amount of physical activity you need to just not be unhealthy is pretty minimal. We're not talking about that. We're talking about frivolous gains. We're talking about exceptional achievement. That's well and good. It stokes the competitive flame. It teaches discipline and shows you how to focus in and zero in and finish what you start. Those are all great things, but they're only really great things if you can take that and apply that to other domains in your life that are more important, more substantial, that actually make other people's lives better as well. So when Laura met me, I had come off my bad marriage. I was a year and a half or so out of that, and I had acquired some dating experience in that time, and my physique looked night and day. In fact, Laura got peak Bromley. Laura got me when I actually had a small waist and kind of a nice V taper. And I could focus on that and say my strategy worked. But the truth is, when Laura met me, I owned a small gym. So there was this appearance that I was ambitious. I was an entrepreneur. I had standards and expectations, held myself accountable, which is hilarious because I don't think any of those words describe me at 29. I also was seen as an authority in every interaction that we had. There's this trope of women like banging or cheating with like their yoga instructor or trainer or something. Anytime a woman is voluntarily going to get instruction from a man, there's an immediate like power dynamic that you don't find very often. As a man, you might not experience that very often. In fact, it's going to be you giving advice nobody asked for and bugging the shit out of everybody around you. I can absolutely look back, and Laura would attest to this. The advantage I got by being the person there that everybody was going to for advice, she came to listen to me for information, to ask me questions. I was seen as an authority. Huge, huge, huge attraction points. That is a very hard thing to reproduce. I also had the benefit of being aloof because I was on my home turf. This is a big one. It's like that rule you learn in like 4th grade that the first person to care loses. If you start with that desire, that desperation, women can smell it on you. It will sour every word that comes out of your mouth. The thing about negging, because I was able to like kind of joke playfully and kind of, she would give me sass and I'd give her shit back. Now, the reason I was able to kind of play around with her was because all my attention wasn't focused on her. I was at work. I was focused on other people. I had some dating experience, so I didn't have this sense of scarcity. Like attention from females is scarce and I had to like grab it and squeeze it every time it came into my field of vision. I could relax. So you take more risks, you engage a little more freely, it's more natural, and it is certainly more attractive. As far as negging goes, like it's very powerful because it does signal that I don't see myself as beneath you. Not necessarily that you're better than, but I don't see myself as beneath you, which in and of itself, especially to attractive women, it kind of throws them off their game. It's a very real thing. But the thing about negging is that it's like doing stand-up comedy. You have to stick the punchline, and nobody does their first time. So that's the important thing to know before you just go out and start talking shit. Unless you're very comfortable with kind of a sarcastic, funny, playful personality, that's not something I recommend jumping into unless you're very comfortable with the person. So all in all, I'd say like the physical change, it was a huge catalyst, but it's a thing that started all the important shit that came downstream after the fact. Like I could say that if I did not grow in those other domains, that if lifting weights didn't somehow influence my growth, that lifting weights, changing my body composition, getting bigger shoulders, a bigger back, whatever, would have had a negligible impact on my outcome. And I would just be somebody who didn't have my house in order, somebody who would be lifting weights to kind of escape from this social arena that I wasn't comfortable in. And I'd just be feeding my insecurity further. Lifting weights is great for personal development, but the personal development isn't a more muscular body. It's all the things you learn that affect the more important things that come later. It's not unlike a college degree. Like it doesn't matter that it was in some bullshit field. Like people aren't hiring you because you have this esoteric knowledge about like Eastern poetry or some other bullshit. Like there's a lot of people with sociology degrees who were then eligible for like a government job where they don't rely on any of it. College is a proxy. It shows that you can go somewhere for 4 years, pay the fuck attention, do your work, hold yourself accountable. And that's really important, to be able to screen people based on that one thing. So a physically developed body, that's just your degree. It's like saying, hey, I can do the bare minimum and do it on a regular basis. And that, more so than the way you actually look, is really what's going to feed those positive changes that allow you to be a more effective person. So we can dwell on women's standards. That's not changing anytime soon. There is a level, I mean, we're all hypocrites in our own ways. Women have their own flavor of hypocritical bullshit that they do. And there's almost a century worth of sitcoms that have been based around them. Just like men have a lot of ridiculous shit that we do as well. So instead of hyper fixating on that, I think the important thing to do is to focus on what you can change, because motherfucker, nobody's coming to save you. So sitting around and whining doesn't do anything except make you feel better. If you're actually concerned about the outcome, the first thing you recognize is that that doesn't do a goddamn thing. So finding out what you can actually impact. This is good news because men as a whole are doing worse. I know that sounds like shitty news, but that's actually good news because high value men, or a man who has his shit together, who is perceived as having status, is in short supply. What that means is the barrier to being seen as having status is much lower. Think of it this way. Beanie Babies were huge in the 90s. Imagine if they made a comeback, but in the last 30 years, everybody scrapped their Beanie Babies because they were worthless all the way up until, let's say, yesterday. Now you're thinking, man, I got a Princess Di Beanie Baby in my basement. But you're like, fuck, man, it's dirty down there. There's cobwebs. I don't feel like getting it, man. I'm just going to be feeding into the capitalist monster, man. And you talk yourself out of it. How much sympathy am I supposed to have for you if you have this immediate key to wealth within your domicile and you just don't want to access it? It's like, I feel for all the men that are doing worse. And empathy is important. But the thing is that empathy without expectation is fucking enabling, and enabling is destructive. We can focus on larger issues and find viable solutions, but the key is to find solutions, not just talk about shit at the 30,000 foot level that you can't do anything about. So if there's something you can do to get out of harm's way, it is your moral obligation to do so. I think there should be pride in being a man. I think there is a male ideal. I don't think it has anything to do with being exceptionally muscular or having a bassy voice or facial hair. I think it has to do with seeing yourself as somebody who is obligated to the people around you, who has a moral responsibility to be of use in any which way that you can, and to recognize that the only way that you are helpful is by actually doing things. It's also recognizing that that doesn't fly only when times are easy. It flies when times are fucking difficult. So you don't get a pass by saying, it's hard out there, man. No shit. The DNA that makes up your corporeal being sits at the end of a chain that is 1 billion deaths long. And it persisted through that chain where most of the other genetic material did not. You have the ability to function and to thrive during hard times. But modern society, modernity as we know it, has given you the option not to. You can sit at home, play Call of Duty, eat Cheez-Its, and cash your fucking unemployment check. You can do that. Just like a rhino in a zoo doesn't have to get up and move around. It can just lay on its side in its own filth. The fact is, men are doing worse now, not in the weird twisted way where women have their expectations. Men are doing worse in the way that we can measure by like graduation rates and employment. They're doing worse than they were very recently. So that gap means that if all you do is show up the way men did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you're going to be beating out so many people. And it might sound like cold, heartless competition, and maybe it is. But let's be real, the websites you frequent aren't called femalepersonalities.com. Do the basics, get your house in order, take care of yourself, commit to finishing what you start. Immerse yourself in a community, engage with other people, be of use to them. And not only will you level up, but you will set the standard for other men to follow suit. You will produce children who know how to do that. And that is how you actually impact a culture instead of just sitting around in your own filth waiting for it to impact you.